Client check-ins are the key to successful nutrition coaching. Why? They allow you to catch up with your client and understand what is going well and what is not going well. You can then support them, you can encourage them when things are going well, and you can support and help them when things are a little bit more difficult, and you can always collaborate to find what is the next best step so they can make progress. Welcome to my channel. My name is Coach Robin, and I share videos on motivation interviewing, organizing your coaching business, and growing your coaching business. If you want to see more videos just like this, make sure that you subscribe. Client check-ins are so important because you learn where your client is at right now. Maybe things are going super well. Then you can send them a virtual high five, encourage them, give them positive feedback, and they are smiling and feeling energized and move forward. But maybe something in the plan is currently not working well for them. Then the client check-in gives you the opportunity to readjust, to collaborate with them and see what is the next best way forward. So client check-ins are essentially the way of constantly and dynamically steering through the difficulties of the client's life, so you make sure that your client reaches their goal. Let's look at the overall coaching process first. So you have the initial assessment, and then every additional meeting is a check-in. We essentially ask, hey, how have things been going? And how are you going to move forward? And the goal of this video is to show you how to do this better, how to get the maximum effect out of these conversations so your client feel better and better and better and progress more and more and more. Maybe you're interested also in how to really well set up the plan in an initial meeting. If that's you, let me know in the comments below. One of the key elements of the overall coaching process is the check-in form. It's a way for you to understand where is your client between sessions. And I have a video in the description where I show you how to create a check-in form, what questions to ask, and I also share my coaching form that you can use immediately. So you can download it and use it today with your clients. How does the overall check-in work? What's the general flow? And it actually starts before you actually have the conversation with the client. It starts by reviewing their notes. It means reviewing the notes from the previous check-in or maybe the initial conversation, and also reviewing the notes from the check-in form so you know what has been happening for them between the two sessions. With these insights, you can already plan ahead. What could be some potential ways to progress with this client? And when you have reviewed and have created a plan, then you have the conversation where the client actually chooses, oh, this is the way I want to progress. And then you have a final step where you essentially close the check-in, give your client everything that they need so they can progress for the next 2 weeks. Let's look at this a little bit more closely. Before we do that, I have a video where I show you a check-in conversation with a real client, including a breakdown of what I did and why I did it. So if you're interested in that, check out the video in the description below. Now, the first part of the check-in is reviewing previous notes and reviewing the check-in form. And the key idea here is that you anticipate and observe potential challenges and also get everything ready for creating a plan. So you already review what are their strengths, what are the resources that you can use to overcome potential struggles. When you look at previous notes, think about what have been the most important insights from this conversation. For sure, it's what have they been working on, what has been their next step, but also maybe you learned something about some struggles, something personal, something about the family that is currently going on. Everything that gives you an insight of where could my client be right now. And if you want to see an example of how to organize your notes, let me know in the comments below. The next part is then to review the check-in form. Again, the check-in form is for you a way to keep track of your client when you're currently not seeing them. When you go into the spreadsheet and look at their entries, you look for things that have been going well because you could highlight them and encourage them, give them positive feedback. You could look at what has been difficult for them because this is an opportunity then to adjust the plan and gives you important insights into, okay, what are we going to do next? Once you have reviewed previous notes, the idea is that you gather information and think about how do we overcome the next obstacle, or how do we adjust the plan so it works better for them. And sometimes it means that you are faced with a weight loss plateau. And if you want to learn how to overcome a weight loss plateau and also what to say when your client is frustrated, check out the video in the description below. Essentially, when you're working on the plan, you have 4 options. One is to continue. So if you focused on food choices, for example, you could go from lean protein to eat vegetables. Maybe you noticed, oh, working with these food choices isn't really working, or you have completed all the food choices, then you go into a new direction. For example, you work on eating better consistently by planning their meals. You could add something. For example, they worked on eating lean protein and then you eat vegetables. Or you could subtract in a way of shrinking. So maybe eating lean protein with every meal was too complicated, so you can shrink it to eat lean protein throughout the day. And the idea here is that you build a menu of options. And that is key, and I want to emphasize this. The goal is not to find this one specific next action. That is not the goal, because right now it's just your perspective, and what you think is the best move forward could be very different from what your client thinks is the best move forward. Also, they may have not told you everything, so you go very focused on one thing into the conversation and they come up with something that you haven't considered, and then you have no plan. So having a couple of options gives you flexibility. And the last part, why building a couple of options is so important, is so that you and the client can collaborate. They can give you information, they can give you insights on what works best for them, what they feel most confident about, what they can actually do, because this makes the plan so much more robust against failure. And it's really key. Build a menu and then discuss with the client what they want to do, what they think is the best move forward. And if you want to create an overarching coaching program, so you know what is the next step for me, check out the video in the description below. Now, how could this look like? What kind of options are we talking about here? So for example, if they have been focusing on their food choices and they ate lean protein for the last 2 weeks, for example, they could focus on, now we are focusing on eating colorful fruits and vegetables. Another option would be, hey, let's make smart carb choices, or let's eat healthy fats. Another option where you would change the direction is, hey, let's eat better consistently. And a couple of options here would be plan your meals, prepare your meals, record your food intake. Or maybe that's not a good way to continue, so you focus on recovery, like getting better sleep. So plan bedtimes, practice a sleep schedule could be options on the menu. Or maybe you notice something in the form and they're struggling with, for example, perfectionism, and then you could build their mindset, like let's think everything on a continuum, or let's work on knowing why you actually want to do it if they struggle with motivation. And the point that I'm trying to make here is it's not just food sources and just eat better consistently. You could pick an option from this and this and this and that, and then you have a nice menu. You can respond in different ways, and your client has a better understanding, okay, how am I going to move forward, or how can we move forward with this? And if you're interested in how you can come up with these practices, let me know in the comments. Once you have your menu of different options, think about how you're going to measure success. So for example, with plan your bedtimes, you could have just a checklist, or maybe they are putting their bedtime into the schedule and then actually follow through. With something like eat lean protein with every meal, they could have a food journal, or maybe they're taking a picture every time they eat and you see, well, there's a piece of lean protein on my dish. I've done the thing. Now that we reviewed the notes, we reviewed the check-in form, we came up with a plan, we know how to measure success. Now it's time to get on a video call with our client. Here's something that I want you to do before the meeting. It's take a second, take a breath, and then set your intentions for the meeting. Think about intention as something that you want to radiate even through the camera, through the internet, all the way to your client. And you could set the intention of being curious, being warm, being welcoming, being compassionate. And you can also set the intention of, I bring my best coaching self forward. What that means and what that does to you is you're adjusting your inner position towards the client and towards your best self. And this will make a big, big difference in the way you show up in the client conversation. And if you want to learn 30 ways of improving your coaching skills, check out the video in the description below. There's also something else that you can do. You can grab my check-in checklist. You can download it from the description below. And then you have a step-by-step guide through a coaching conversation, so you know you don't miss an important point and you always know what to do next. So check it out. What is the overall structure of a check-in conversation? At first you have the opening, that's the high part. These are the first couple of minutes. Then you have negotiating the agenda. So this is about reviewing what has happened in the last 2 weeks, and also what are you going to focus on with your client. From there's potentially some confidence building, so they are actually confident they can take action. And the last part is deciding this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we measure success. The opening part of the conversation, this really is about getting into a rhythm and warming up with the client. If you have known a client for a long time, this can be rather short. If this may be the second meeting with the client, this can be a little bit longer because you have to adjust and get to know each other a little bit more first. So what can you do in this process? A good way to approach this is using a callback. For example, you can quickly catch up on something that they're interested in. Their family, their pets, their sports, their hobby, something that shows that you know something about them outside of coaching and that they want to talk about. When you have the conversation, at some point you can move into the coaching part of the conversation by asking a question like, how have things been going for you since the last time we met? And this moves the conversation from the opening into the negotiating the agenda part. But how do I know, or how do you know when is the good time to ask this question? What you're going for is a real conversation. So look at signs that you have a conversation with a real person that says something that is unique about them. If they say, yeah, life is good and yeah, well, things are going, the weather has been raining, that's not a real conversation. You want something that is unique to this person. So they're telling you about their wife, their children, their pets, their hobby, something at work, whatever it is, you look for something unique and real. When you have that, when you have this connection, then you know, okay, I am ready to move into the negotiating part. The focusing part splits up into two again. You have review, so you get your client's perspective on the last 2 weeks, and then also you have the conversation of what happens next. Why is the review part so important? One, you don't have the full picture. You have a little bit of a conversation between sessions, maybe you have the check-in form, but you haven't got the full picture. Having the conversation and letting the client tell you how have things been going for them is super important to get a better and broader understanding. And it's also important because you can highlight positive progress. You can encourage them, give them positive feedback. And this is something many coaches neglect or underestimate. Give someone positive feedback that they're doing something well, and they're so much more motivated to do it again and again. And there's a third part, and it's the part of what made success possible. The other part of this step is that you review what has been difficult. Maybe how they have overcome this difficulty, or maybe not. Because this also gives you important insights of how to adjust the program so this doesn't happen, so they either circumvent the struggles or overcome them. Here's a nice way to transition into the focusing part. You could say something like, given what we have discussed, I have a couple of ideas how to move forward, but first I would like to know what you think is a good path forward. The idea here is let them tell you what they think and what they have been feeling. Let them announce and voice their thoughts and how they want to proceed. Because the idea is if they come up with the idea, they are so much more likely to actually follow through with it. And think about it for a second. If you say, oh, I'm going to do that to another person, then your commitment is so much higher compared to when the other person said, oh, you should do that. So this is the key. Let them bring ideas into the conversation. So give lots and lots of space for their perspective, their direction, and then exchange and collaborate and see what is the best move forward. And how do you know that you have found a good next action? Well, first of all, they have to be willing to do it. The other part is that it's in their control to change. So they can actually do something to bring about change. And that is only possible when you have a clear and specific action. So for example, eating lean protein with every meal is clear, specific, in their control, and hopefully they are willing to do this action. And the last part is also important, and many coaches omit that or forget about it, the relevancy. The client needs to know why eating protein is so important. You have to connect why eating protein leads to desired outcomes that lead to the goal of the client. Here's a big issue that a lot of coaches fall into, and that's the premature focus trap. You go into the conversation well prepared. You think what's going on. You have a plan, you know how to move forward. So it's very easy to zero in very quickly on something that you want, while completely missing that your client wants to go in a different direction. And that can be a huge struggle because you try to push in this direction and they pushing into a different direction. And you can also already see from this image, this is not going to be productive. Consider, is this something that I want, or is this something that the client wants? Are we working together towards a common goal, or are we on the opposite sides of something? Have I focused too quickly? Something that I like to do here is, I notice you wanted to talk about this, but you also mentioned this. Is it okay when we continue with that, or is this more important? And then your client can tell you, yeah, let's focus on that. That's more important. And then you're fine, then you don't have to consider the premature focus tab, but build in some of these fail-safes so that you understand, oh, we are actually talking about something that is relevant and important to the client. And then when you have decided on a specific action, like eat lead protein with every meal, you can ask your client on a scale from 1 to 10, how ready, willing, and able are you to eat lean protein with every meal? And the idea here is that you're checking their confidence. And it's not just, do you feel confident to do that? And they, but you want a specific number, and we are going to talk about this number in a second. The goal here is that you have a very clear feedback that they are ready to do that they're willing to do that, and they have everything that they need to do it. And essentially you can get two different answers to this confidence ruler. You can get an answer of a 9 out of 10 or 10, and that's cool. Then you can proceed to the summary. And we'll go talk about this in a minute. The other response is they are saying, oh, it's an 8 or lower. What can we do to boost their confidence so we get a 9 out of 10? Because you have to understand, this 9 out of 10 is they're at least 90% confident that they can do the next action. So how can we boost their confidence? For example, they said they are a 5 out of 10. So they're 50% confident. Then you could ask, why are you at 50% confident and not at 0? The cool thing about this question is they start to mention all the reasons why they're confident. You can make a list, and suddenly maybe this list becomes longer and longer and longer, and they feel, just by becoming aware of why they feel confident, they become more confident. Another question is, what would it take for you to get to a 6 or a 7? And the idea here is they tell you what they need from you to feel more confident. If you can provide that, easy confidence boost. Then you can look at their superpowers. What have been working well for them? What are their strengths? What they can do? What resources do they have? And how can they use these resources for the next section? And that is why I always talk about resource and strengths list, especially in the beginning, because then you have a list of all the things that they have and all the strengths, and you can go, oh, I could use this or that to solve this problem. Sometimes just change about the strategy. Maybe you ask them again, okay, knowing that, how could you approach this in a different way to feel more confident? And part of that is the question of past successes. So how have you been able to eat protein, for example, consistently in the past? Or how have you been able to eat consistently something else in the past? Or maybe even what has been working for you to eat consistently? And then you can gather all these strengths, all these informations, everything that works for them, and see if you can just change the action step a little bit more so they feel confident enough to move forward. But sometimes that doesn't work. They still don't take action. They still say, but sometimes that doesn't work. Or they say they feel confident, but sometimes that doesn't work. Maybe you don't get to an agreement, so they never feel confident during the conversation. Or maybe they say they are confident and then notice that they really struggle to take action and feel stuck. And at first, this can be very frustrating because maybe you're running out of time during the session, or maybe you feel this, oh, I'm a bad coach. So you don't know what to do. The important part in these moments is that you get curious, because there is something about your client that you haven't understand yet, and it's an opportunity for you to learn. And how can you do that? Essentially, there are 3 things that could be happening right now. One is the change is still too big, and you haven't been able to shrink it enough that the client is confident. So you can always think about, oh, maybe I make it smaller and smaller, or go into a different direction. Another reason is that they feel resistance. Maybe you have focused on something, but they actually want to talk about something else. Or maybe they express something about the relationship that something doesn't work and you don't respect that. So there's this internal resistance to change, potentially because of something that you said. And another part is the issue of ambivalence, of wanting one thing and another thing. And you have experienced this yourself. When you sit in front of the television, you want to play video games, but you also want to meditate. Or you want to eat ice cream and you also want to lose weight. And dealing with resistance and ambivalence can be a huge challenge. And I'll link a video in the description about change talk. Change talk is the key to resolving these more difficult situations when you cannot simply find a next action that the client feels confident with. Or you maybe find something, but they have an internal struggle and they feel stuck. Change talk is everything that the client says that favors change. So when you're able to elicit change talk, that means you're enabling the client to tell you what they want to change. How amazing is that? How amazing would be that you could ask a couple of questions and the client tells you everything that they want to change and that they feel ready and willing and able to change. So if you're interested in that, check out the video in the description. Now that we have reviewed the notes, came up with a plan, negotiated what the plan is, and the client is 9 out of 10 confident that they can actually do the thing, they can actually eat lean protein with every meal. Now it's time to wrap up the conversation and create a little package for the client so they can move forward without you for the next 2 weeks. So prepare your clients to leave. And what I mean by that is go through these questions so your client has everything that they need to take action even when you're not around. So one important question is, what will help you to do this action? So for example, what will help you eat lean protein with every meal? And the next part is then what could get in the way of success? Always talk about the idea of, oh, there is something that could prevent success. For example, preventing me from eating lean protein is I don't have protein in my fridge. So how can you plan and prepare for this obstacle? Well, I make sure that I have lean protein in my fridge for the next 3 days, for example. And sometimes you also have to negotiate these next actions or discuss these next actions with someone else. So if you're not living alone, for example, you discuss with your wife, with your kids, with your roommate about some of these next actions. And the idea is that this is a summary of everything that the client needs to eat lean protein for the next 2 weeks. Right before the end, for me at least, I ask the client one more time, please summarize what are you going to do in the next 2 weeks. The idea is that they have one more time the opportunity to clearly articulate what they're going to do, how they're measuring success, how often are they going to do it, and so on and so on and so on. They have clarity before they leave the conversation on what to do, and you have a final opportunity to correct and adjust if there has been a misunderstanding. And then something you can do is summarize these important insights for your client. So for example, I send an email with what is the next action, why is the next action important, what will help them to be successful, what could get in the way, how they are preparing for the obstacle, and who are they going to talk about this with. So talk about this next action. And if you want to see an email template for this, you can go into the description and download it and use it for yourself. So there are a few final steps when you're closing the meeting. One is discuss with the client when you're going to catch up, when is the next meeting, or how they're going to book a next meeting with you. Then, when the client leaves, take a couple of minutes to review your notes and make a couple of notes for the next meeting. For example, what have been the key insights? What have you learned about their why, their values, their struggles, their strengths? And also, of course, what is the next action? Why is this next action important? How are they going to do it? What is getting in the way? And so on and so on and so on. This allows you to more easily review the next time you have a check-in and be better prepared for the next check-in when it's coming. And there's a final part that all lifelong learners do. They have a little reflection at the end of the conversation, thinking about what went well, what didn't went well, what do I want to continue, what do I want to focus on next. So if you want to see how to do these little reflections at the end and what questions to ask so you can continually improve your coaching time and time again, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Check out these videos on a coaching demonstration, a check-in form, and how to create one for yourself, and also how to elicit change talk and how to respond to it so the client is more ready, willing, and able to change. Again, thank you so much for watching.